I'm Trexie, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. I don't believe I've ever seen this many people in the chambers here since I've been coming down. And I'm glad you came. It's always nice if you're going to talk if somebody comes, you know. That's by way of asking you to don't leave till I get through. I'm rated here tonight. I don't know how many times, but there's at least one guy in the audience that could rescind my sobriety. I've only had 31 years without a drink or a pill. And my boy right there is 32 years. He gets 32 when I get 31. Is there anybody here with 32 years or more besides Jack? No. So I guess I'm pretty safe. Jack's been sick, and I can whip him on less ground than it takes to snag his clothes right now, you know. So he's not going to try to throw me out. You know that Swede that read the portion of chapter 5? I was talking to him a couple of nights ago, and he said, I'm going to be there. He said, I'm reading chapter 7. And I think he was talking about being sober 27 or 8 years or something like that. Reading chapter 7 tonight. Well, he can't read very good, but he can sure play the piano. I guess there isn't anybody here that's any more grateful than I am. Some of you might be as grateful, but there isn't anybody here that's more grateful than I. And I think perhaps the reason that I've been so slap happy in this program for 31 years is because I can't take any credit for coming. I can't take any credit for living long enough to get here. If I could have possibly remained in left field and survived, I wouldn't be here now. So I can't take any credit for any part of it. As long as I had the power of choice, my choice was never to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I heard somebody say a minute ago from here that they had the power of choice again. I always get a kick out of that because I haven't got any choice. I hear people say, well, I got a choice now whether to drink or not to drink. I haven't. You know, I don't call it a choice when one side of the deal is death. I don't think that's a choice. So I've got no choice. And another thing that I got here knowing was that I couldn't stay sober. And I still know it. It's absolutely necessary that I don't drink because I can't drink and live. And of myself, I can't keep from drinking. Of myself, I can't keep from drinking. And I know that. So why am I not drunk tonight? I'm a tongue-chewing, babbling, idiot drunk. Why am I not drunk tonight? There's only one reason. I have the thing I was looking for in the bottle. That's the only reason I'm not drunk. I have the thing I was looking for in the bottle. What is the thing? I'm not fighting me or you or life or God or the devil. I'm at peace with me and with you and with my very own God. And that's the only reason I'm not drunk. There's nothing in a bottle or a pill or a needle or a pot or acid that can do anything for me but tear me down. And I know it. So, I'm going to do the things necessary to maintain myself in a state of peace and joy and comfort with me. That's what I have to do. When I got here, I suspect that 97% of us figured that if you hadn't had a drink today, you were sober. I think 97% of us now, who have been around a while, know that sobriety is built on not drinking today, but that's just the foundation. Sobriety, I believe, is fourfold. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Four-part deal. And it adds up to the ability to live comfortably, peacefully, and joyously with ourselves. This is sobriety. And anything short of it, I believe to be partial sobriety. Now, I've heard much talk, many arguments, that if you've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for a while, say 4, 5, 10 years, that you have to think to drink. I don't believe it. I don't think you have to think at all. I think all you have to do is to quit doing the things that keep you comfortable. And automatically you get drunk. Because that's the way it is with an alcoholic. If you and I could have stayed sober or could have obtained and maintained sobriety, we would not be members of this leper colony. We wouldn't need this and we wouldn't need God. We'd have done it. We could not do it. And that's the reason we're here. I hope he isn't in the crowd, but I had a guy come to see me the other night. He's about to make a big trip around the country. I mean, outside of this one. And he's doing some talking. And he wanted to know how he should take this deal. What he should do about it, you know. Here he's going to talk in several foreign countries, and he don't want to make a bad impression of Alcoholics Anonymous in the States. And took the hell out of me. Because I said to him, I said, you want to impress them somewhat. Right? Well, if you're going to impress them, you got to be an expert. You know, you got to be an expert. Now, there's several definitions of an expert. We hear lots of places that if you're 500 miles away from home, you're an expert. You know? Nobody can read you off if you're as much as 500 miles away from home. But I think the best definition I ever heard of the expert is that X is a has-been and spurt is a drip under pressure. So, I don't think the old boy responded very good to me on that stuff. Strange how easy it is for us to forget that we had to fail to get here. You know? We had to fail to get into this leper colony. So, I don't think that we should ever forget that. I can't forget it. Because I was a failure at the ripe old age of 43. I was a failure as a husband, a father, a businessman, a man, and a drunk. Now that's all the departments I had. If I'd had any more departments, I'd have failed in them too. But that's all the departments I had. And it don't bother me. It don't bother me a bit. You know, it's a strange thing how the society that we live in, this so-called civilization, how much they dislike the words failure and surrender. You know, surrender is for the weak. The strong man wins, the weak man surrenders, you know. And failure, oh, you mustn't be a failure. You gotta, you know, you can't be a failure. I have a lot of fun with that one because I get to talk every once in a while with non-alcoholic audiences or those who haven't yet confessed. And sometimes I have some pretty big audiences. And I can look at them and I can tell that 97% of them are scared to death of failure. Scared to death. And so many people are. And I look at them and I tell them maybe something like this. I got your Albany short hair. I can tell by looking at you that 97% of you are scared to death of failure. And I'm not afraid of failure at all. I am a failure. They fall out of their seats. I'm the guy up there talking, see? I am a failure. And the wonder of this life is, if you happen to be an alcoholic, surrender is victory. And people just can't get that through their heads. Surrender is victory. We win this fight by giving up the fight. Giving it up. Now, taking me as a horrible example. When Eddie called on Bell for the first time, I called on me. I'd already been drinking for 15 years. I had had a code for drinking. And I had a code for everything. But I had a code for drinking too. And I'd pretty well drunk according to code for 15 years. And I wasn't drinking according to my code. I was doing a bad job. And I didn't like it. So I had a session with me. And I came up with the conclusion that this was a personal weakness. Something that I had to overcome to get rid of. And I started my battle 10 years before coming to this program to beat that rap. And I worked on it very diligently. The harder I worked, the worse it got, and the worse it got, the harder I worked. And I'm sure that the last 5 years, 90% of my waking time was spent on the problem. And it was just like watering, fertilizing, and cultivating a weed. The thing just grew out of all proportions. The longer I looked at the problem, the bigger it got, and the worse it got. And nothing happened to the problem until I took my eyes off the problem and started looking at and trying to live in the answer. What you people told me the first night I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing happened to the problem except it grew out of all proportions. Until I totally took my eyes off the problem and started looking at and trying to live in the answer. Surrender is victory. Now, would to God it was possible for one of us to tell another what it means to surrender. But it can't be done. Maybe about all we can say about it is that probably there's no such thing as peace of mind and serenity of purpose, as long as it's necessary for you and I to attempt to satisfy the human ego. Because that, too, is an impossibility. I suspect that it is a divine impossibility to satisfy the human ego. Because the human ego is duality. Conscious separation from. From what? From God, from each other, and eventually from ourselves. Conscious separation from. The feeling of conscious separation from. This is the human ego. It's duality. Me against the world. And there's no way under heaven to satisfy the human ego. For instance, I live up on the hill there in Laguna Beach, and I look down on that channel. It's about 30 miles across the channel from my shoreline there, the Catalina Island. And I look at that channel and I say to myself, if that whole thing was bourbon whiskey, it wouldn't be enough to satisfy my obsession to drink. Now that 30 miles is just the top of it, Ralph. It's just the top of it. It's deep, too. Now that'd make a lot of toddies, wouldn't it? That whole thing was bourbon whiskey. It wouldn't be enough to satisfy my obsession to drink. Because now, or when I was drinking the last 10 years, I'd stay on my feet maybe almost a month or so, and then I'd go to bed. And I'd drink the clock around. And every time I opened my eyes, I'd drink. And I'd never quit drinking as long as I could roll out of bed and get another supply. When I couldn't even lift my head off the pillow, Mrs. C would have to lift up my head to put a little liquid in my mouth. I'd have to quit. No way can my obsession to drink be satisfied. Now let's look at a couple other obsessions. What about the obsession for money? If you haven't got two coppers to rub together, $5 is a fortune. If you got $5, you're broke. You know? It's all relative. No way. I had a client from Phoenix, Syrian chap. He wasn't an alcoholic. He'd gone from one head of lettuce to $35 million. And he'd say to me, Charlie, I was Charlie in business. Charlie, how can I be like you? And I'd say, you can't, Eddie. And he'd say, how come? I said, Eddie, who needs God when he got $35 million? You can buy anything you want, including women. And you do. Now go ahead and make yourself 150 million, and you will if you live, because everything you touch turns to money. But when you get 150 million, you will know by that time that it can't do for you what you have to have done right here. Then you can say, Charlie, how can I be like you? And I'll tell you, and you can do it, but not until. And he'd say, well, talk to me about it anyway. And we'd ride all over the state of Arizona talking about the things we're talking about tonight. But Eddie didn't get his 150. He got too many things in his head, and it exploded. And we had to bury him. It's absolutely impossible to satisfy an obsession for money. What about power? The obsession for power. We just went through the greatest struggle, I hope, that will ever take place in this country. Power struggle. Watergate. And everybody in this room and everybody else in the United States was hurt by that thing. And nobody won. It's absolutely impossible to satisfy an obsession for power. Now, I like to throw this one in because it's something that many of us understand. Suppose my obsession had been for women, as if it weren't. And suppose I'd have been the greatest Lothario of all times. And every chicken that I ever took out after I caught, but one. Now at my age, that'd be quite an army, wouldn't it? Would they satisfy my obsession? No. This one would kill me, the one I couldn't get. It's absolutely impossible to satisfy the human ego. So if you can't beat them, join them. Get rid of it, because the human ego is the father of all obsessions. All obsessions of the mind are children of the ego. I want, I don't want, I like, I don't like, ay. Self-surrender is the thing. Now, again, had I had to surrender consciously the first time, I'd have died without coming to this program. No question in my mind about it. The word wasn't even in my vocabulary. I had never admitted defeat in 43 years of life, not one time, to God, man, woman, or the devil, until January 1946, when the bottle killed me. My last trip out, which turned out to be a 4-week blackout, the bottle beat me to death. It beat me into total and absolute nothingness. And I can say to you now, without fear of successful contradiction, that that was the greatest single event that's ever happened in my life. And I'm coming up pretty soon for 75 years old. This may be the least sensitive audience I've ever talked to. Every damn one of you know that I don't look like I was 75 years old. Now I'm going to say that again, and I want you everyone to say, "Oh." That's better. The greatest single event that has ever taken place in my life was when the bottle killed me. Because I got to the program not wanting anything for myself, not even sobriety. And this is what I'm going to be talking about tonight, because something we don't very often spend too much time on. But it's the very core, the very heart of what this program will do for us if we do it. I came to sometime after the middle of January 1946 with nothing in my body but whiskey. The drunk had started the Friday before Christmas, 1945. And I had done nothing but empty bottles from that time until after the middle of January 46. And so I had nothing in my body but liquor. I never ate when I drank. And yet I came to with the clearest head I've ever known. Lasted long enough for these things that I'm about to speak of, for them to happen. I came to knowing that I'd lost a battle of life. The first time in 43 years that I'd made that admission to myself. I did not know why. Because I knew nothing of alcoholism. Nothing. I don't know that I'd ever heard the word. But I knew that I'd lost a battle of life. I knew why my good wife was divorcing me after 20 years. And I might quickly say without cause. I'd given her 20 of the best years of my life. Here she was divorcing me. And I knew why. And I knew she should have done it 10 years before. And I knew why her kids wouldn't come home when I was around if they could help it. And I knew why my boss man had sent word to the house that if I ever stepped foot in the plant again, he was going to throw me through the window. And the window to which he referred don't open. I accepted the fact that morning that everything dear to me in life was gone and should be gone, and that I was not entitled to have it back. Now I'm going to say that again because that's what my new life is built on. I totally and completely accepted the fact that everything dear to me in life was gone and should be gone, and that I wasn't entitled to have it back. I also accepted death, because on the next to the last trip out, I had gotten pretty close to it. I had run out of time and was in my withdrawal period, and I'd gone to the kitchen after a glass of buttermilk. Mrs. C. and Dick were sitting in the living room. They heard me let out a beller and heard me hit the floor, so they figured I was in an alcoholic convulsion. So they came running out, they tell me, to keep me from swallowing my tongue if they could. But I wasn't convulsing. I wasn't doing nothing. I was just lying there on the kitchen floor as peaceful as anybody you ever saw. They tell me I was a peculiar color. I was blue. And they couldn't wake me up. And they got all excited and called the oxygen squad at Beverly Hills Receiving Hospital to come down and see what they could do for me. And I have reason to believe that they brought me around. I remember what happened after I came to. There's a young doctor with him, and he said to me, "To all intents and purposes, you were dead. We have had a hell of a time bringing you to. Nobody will ever bring you to again under these circumstances." And then he gave me a little of the finest counsel I've ever heard in my life. He looked me right in the eye and he said, "If I were you, I wouldn't do that anymore." Now I want to pass that on to you new people tonight. If I were you, I wouldn't do that anymore. But I did it again. And the last time was worse than the next to the last time, so I knew I was going to die. And it was all right. But I didn't want to die with the record. I didn't want Mrs. C and the kids to remember me as nothing but a tongue-chewing, babbling, idiot drunk. And it became very necessary that I be sober till I died. Just so that I could rub out as much of the record as I could. Now, before I go along, there are people in this room, I'm sure, who lived with drunks like me, maybe, for a long time, and who thought that we didn't love them at all. Mrs. C, I bet she said to me 500 times, Chuck, if you loved us, you wouldn't do these things. And how could I tell her that it was because I loved her and the kids that I did them? You can't say that. But it was the truth. Some of the worst drunks I ever got on in my life was because I knew I was crucifying my wife and my kids, and I couldn't help it. Nothing I could do about it. Now, I was a periodic for the last 10 years because I was going to beat the rap, and you can't fight a very good battle if you're down on your back. So I became a periodic, and many's the time between drunks. I'd lie there in my bed, which was just that far from hers, and I'd wait till I knew by her breathing that she was asleep. And then I'd cry me up a river. It's the only thing I could do. I'd lie there and cry that pillow full of tears. I wanted so much to take her in my arms and say, honey, I love you. I'll never do this again. But hell, I'd already done it 100 times. So there was nothing to do but lie there and bawl, you know. I never got to the place where I didn't love my wife and my kids. And on this particular morning, my only reason for wanting sobriety was to rub out as much of the record as I could before I died. And I said to myself, if I ever live to get out of this bed, I'll find AA. And immediately the curtain dropped. My sanity was gone, and I was sickened to death, drunk and insane. And I had a lot of dying to do. But from the moment of commitment until right now, I've never had a drink or a pill. Such is the great significance of this thing called surrender. So I came to the program to find out from people like you how I could live today without drinking, just so I could rub out as much of the record as I could. I did not even want sobriety for me. I wanted nothing for me. And I want to just make a little point of this, because we're getting so many... I started to cuss there, but I mustn't. I could, though. This is in council chambers, isn't it? I was thinking maybe I was in church. So. We're getting so many experts on related disorders that it's difficult to get anybody to go call on a drunk now. If there's nothing but a drunk, they don't even want to go. They've got to use big words. You know, got to be psychologists. Related disorders. Now, I give you a bunch of related disorders, I think. Mrs. C's divorcing me, I believe that's a related disorder. Kids who won't spit on me, I think that's a related disorder. The boss is going to throw me through the window if I ever step foot in the plant again. I believe that to be a related disorder. I had no health, no sanity, no money, no home, no job, and no whiskey. I think there's a bunch of king-size related disorders. And you know how much time I spent on the related disorders? None. Not 1 second did I spend on any of those related disorders. And yet they all disappeared with the obsession to drink. The whole bunch of them. I didn't know it until I discovered it. Now, I'm going to tell you the series of discoveries that I made. Looking from the date that I came to forward, and then we'll look backward. It was a great fear upon me that I couldn't have this thing. And after 6 months of a meeting every night, I discovered I was sober and had been for 6 months. Now that was the first discovery. Not a drink or a pill for 6 months. What a discovery that was. And I immediately got lost trying to give it back. And another 6 months went by. And I discovered I had a family. Now, until then, I didn't know I had a family. I'll tell you a little story about that because it's worth listening to. And there's some people here that know who I'm talking about. We had a little old gal out there in Beverly Hills by the name of Louise. Louise might have been 20 years older than I don't know. That's the way I remember it. I lived between Wilshire and Olympic. That was down in the flat country where the poor people lived. She lived up in the big numbers. 620 North Camden. And she was loaded. And she used to go with me to meetings. All I had to do was call her and say, let's go to North Hollywood or something, and she'd go. And I don't even remember how I ever got acquainted with her in the first place. And sometime between the first 6 months and the first year, she called my house to get hold of me, see? And Mrs. C answered the phone. And Louis says, who in the hell are you? And Mrs. C says, well, I'm Chuck's wife. Didn't know he had a wife. Mrs. C said, well, he didn't either. And I didn't. But a year went by, and I discovered that the family were living like kittens. Same gal that's sitting right over there now. Living like kittens. And that was a pretty good discovery. Another 6 months went by. And I discovered I was still trying to clean up my desk at the office. Now, the boss had come in when I showed up there the first time. And I showed up there before I ever got to a meeting. Because I knew where the office was. And I didn't know where to find you lepers. My keen alcoholic mind told me that you wouldn't be in the phone book. You were anonymous, weren't you? They don't anonymous in the phone book. So knowing you weren't there, I never looked. And incidentally, that's the story of my life. I knew so damn much that wasn't true, I couldn't learn anything that was. So I had to call people and ask them if they knew anybody that knew anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it took me a little while to find you. So I'd gone to the office before I ever got to a meeting. And the boss saw my old car in the parking lot. And knew I was on the premises and knew I wasn't going to stay. And he came hunting for me. And he busted in my office like a bull in a china closet. Fortunately for me, I was on the telephone. I was his phone, and he was a frugal man. He didn't want to throw that phone through the window. So he got busy moving my drafting boards out of the way. So he'd have a clear shot at the window when I hung up. And I hung up the phone, and they started after me. And I couldn't have defended me with a shotgun, because I didn't have the shakes, I had the leaps. And the only thing I could say to him was, Victor, leave me alone. Don't work for you anymore. I'm down here to clean up this desk. I'm here to do the things you paid me for last year that didn't do. And as soon as I get even with you, I'll get the hell out of here on my own power. And you'll never owe me a penny as long as you live. But for God's sake, leave me alone. I've got to get even with you. And he stopped in his tracks. He says, what the hell's happened to you, Charlie? I says, don't know. And I didn't. But he did. And he didn't throw me through the window. And a year and a half later, I discovered I was still trying to clean up that desk. And business was good. Now that's the third big discovery. Another year went by. And I discovered that my own state of being was better than anything that I'd ever dreamed of. Life was good. And that's not a bad discovery. And maybe 4, maybe 5 years, I don't know just how much time it was, I made the great discovery. I discovered I was never alone anymore. I had a God of my very own, and wherever I am, He is. And that's the great discovery. When we make that discovery, the search is over, and life begins. Now, I would say that that was a period of 5 years. And that's about the time elements that took place between discoveries. But looking backwards, the whole thing happened the morning I came to, and accepted myself exactly as I was, where I was, and accepted you exactly as you were, where you were, and accepted the conditions, the environment around me exactly as it was, where it was, and started to do something about it. The whole thing took place right there. Because, you see, I haven't had to have a drink or a pill since. Now, this is the reason that I am so much to talk of surrender, to getting out of our own way. And it's not only me, it's our book. All the way through that book of ours, it's talking about this very same thing. The preamble to the 12 steps, the first part of chapter 5, talks about rarely have we seen a person fail. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed the path. And then it talks a little about rigorous self-honesty. And then it talks a little about half measures. But it don't say half measures availed us 50%. Or 10% measures will avail us 10%. It says half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked His protection with complete abandon. Then it says, here are the steps we took. T-double-O-K, took. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. It talks about letting go absolutely. All in those first couple of pages before the 12 steps. And that's what we're talking about. Would to God that it was possible for us to know what it means to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. This is a fantastic thing. And I don't believe many of us really know what kind of a thing it is. You see, the first step is a twofold admission of defeat. The second is a left-handed admission that we're insane. And the third one, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God because we've lost the battle. And we've been to human help and didn't get it. So we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Now, if I do that, I am no longer my problem. I am no longer my problem. If I turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I'm His problem. And self-concern has no place in my life. And we just don't know what this is. I had a guy come down to the house to see me the other day, and he was afraid of everything in life. Oh, the man's scared to death, you know. And I said to him, well, how long has it been, if ever, that you took these steps, these 12 steps here? And he said, why, I've been taking them for years. I said, how about the first 3? Have you taken the first? Why, he says, I've taken them all. You taken the third one? He says, yeah. Well, I said, what the hell are you afraid of? What are you afraid of if you've turned your will and your life over to the care of God? Now, I'd ask the assembly here tonight, how many of you believe in God? I suspect I'd get a 90% affirmation. But if I ask you all, how many of you trusted God, I think I'd get me an entirely different percentage. And I don't believe there's any sense in turning your will and your life over to the care of a God you can't trust. I can't trust me, so I might as well keep it as to give it to a God I can't trust. And you know what self-concern is? It's simply saying, look, Dad, I don't believe you're quite as familiar with this problem as I am. I got to get you a little outside help. You know? I run all over this dad-blame world since I quit going any place. And that's the truth. When I was going someplace, I couldn't get from the office to Watts. And my plant was in the curfew district. I quit going any place, and I've gone all over the world now. And I find out people all over the world beating their brains out on their defects of character, pulling those chestnuts out of the fire and burning themselves to death with them, year after year. I was riding with a carload of women from Louisiana to Dallas. And I have to tell you that they were all alcoholic women. It wouldn't have been so bad if it had been a bunch of Al-Anon-Nonnies and hot cha-chas. But these were all alcoholic gals. And one of them was telling me, this was in November, and one of them was telling me that she had already done 11 fourth and fifth steps since the first of the year. 11 of them. And I said, my God almighty, gal, what are you trying to do? Kill yourself? You know? That bunch had a gal in Houston that they paid for doing their fifth step with him. No, I'm not stressing it a bit. And that just ain't what my book tells me. My book gives me the first three, and then it says we took that. Those are decision steps. All out of the first three are decisions. They're no action. The fourth and fifth are action. You write an inventory and share it. And then it says, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. I humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Now, don't tell me I've got to beat my brains out from now on. I become willing to give them away and give them away. And I'm pretty simple. Do you know how I know whether I've given them away or not? If I ain't got them. Now, that's too simple for drunks, isn't it? But that's the way it is. Again, if you and I could have beaten this rap, we would not be here. And if we couldn't beat it when we were me, for instance, 31 years younger than I am today, how am I going to beat it now? I'm not even going to try. That's how I'm going to beat it. Because I haven't tried to do away with any one of my defects of character. I never tried to get my wife back. I never tried to get the love of my kids back. I never tried to find God. I'd hunted God for 30 years before I got here. I couldn't find Him because I had Him located someplace else. And you can't find Him when you got Him located someplace else, because you got to find Him where He is. And if you got Him located out yonder someplace, you're never going to find Him, because what you're looking for, you're looking with. You got to find Him where He is. And with the taking the chance on running out of time with you, I've got to tell you the little story that brings that home to me. I happen to be a damned Indian, along with everything else. And I love animals and birds and bees and stuff, and I learn more from them about what to do than I do from people. I learn from people what not to do. There used to be a lot of deer in the canyon. There's still a few of them. My canyon up there, Laguna Canyon. And every time I go through there, regardless of what time of the day or the night it is, I look for deer. Now, a lot of people think you got to see them or look for them at a particular time of the day, or you're never going to see them. But that's not right. I've seen them all times of the day and the night. And I was going out through there one day at about 10:30. This is 15 years ago. And I'm looking for deer. And invariably I look for them the last place I saw them. You know, I saw them here, and so I look there, because they might be there again. But they ain't. Invariably I see them someplace else. And on this particular morning, it was 10:30, and it was a bright, sunshiny day like today. And I quit looking as soon as I got out of cover. When there was no place for them to hide, I thought, well, no self-respecting deer would be out here in the pasture where he can't hide, you know, at this time of day. So I quit looking. And I'm driving along, and I look over there in the meadow, and There wasn't anything 6 inches high in the whole place, and there stood one of the prettiest big bucks that you ever saw. And you know what he said to me? He says, "You see them where they are." That's what he said. You see them where they are. You don't see them where you saw them last or where you think they ought to be. You see them where they are. And before I got to town, I had been through every relationship in life. You see them where they are. And I had a picnic with them. What you're looking for, you're looking with. This is an inside job. This whole thing is an inside job. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous is uncovering, discovering, and discarding. It's exactly what it is. Uncovering, discovering, and discarding. We uncover the thing we've been looking for all our lives. And it's right here. It always was right there. Now, there's a few other people that have said something about that. You don't have to take my word for it. The carpenter man, a couple of thousand years ago, he said, "The Father and I are one." He didn't say two, he said one. He said, "I am the Father, and He and me, and I and you." Now that's a pretty close relationship, isn't it? I'm in the Father, and He and me, and I and you. One life with many faces. God is life. And He said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." He said all those things. That's what I'm talking about. We uncover and discover the thing that we've been searching for all our lives, and the thing from which we cannot escape. This is the strange part of it. You can't get away from the thing you've been looking for all your life, because it's you. The first two words of the Lord's Prayer, I'm quite sure, mean what to say. I've lived with people like you for 31 years. And if there's one thing you've proven to me, it is that every one of us are God's kids. Whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, even if we deny it, we can't change it. God, my Father, I, His kid. Now, if that be true, you can let your imagination go crazy. And you can't even get close to the truth of being itself. There is nothing that can even get close to the truth of being itself. God, my Father, I, His child. And it's actually closer than that. Because I've got two boys. One of them someplace, I presume, in Southern California. The other one someplace in New York. And I don't know where either one of them is. You can't get that way with God. Because God is life, and you and I are alive. God is that which I am, and God is that which you are. And we uncover and discover this. And this, incidentally, is the meaning of "as we understood Him" in our book. The "as we understood Him" has no reference to understanding God. Thank God. Had that been a condition for sobriety, I'd have died 31 years ago. But what that means is the necessity of individual experience. I find my God, you find your God. And you couldn't find my God in 5,000 years, and I couldn't find yours in 10. Because my God is uniquely me, and your God is uniquely you. Albeit it's the same God. It's fantastic. And we discovered this. Now, there are two or three little things that I'll say and quit. Conscious separation's a problem. Duality is the problem. And conscious unity is the answer. Now, I'm going to quote a couple of Catholics, because I don't happen to be Catholic. You can't tell your friends that I came down here and laid Catholicism on you. They wouldn't have me. So, the first one was Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence was a pot and pan washer in a monastery just outside Paris. In 1666, we were boys together. And he said everybody'd be yelling for something different at the same time. He didn't pay attention to him. He just washed pots and pans and talked to God. Said he didn't know when his prayers of office started and stopped and his prayers began. And in talking to one of his troubled friends, he said to him, "He is within you. Look not for him elsewhere." So that's just what I'm saying. And at the same time, or thereabouts, there was a Dominican priest in Germany. And he said, "You have heard that nature abhors a vacuum. I tell you, God abhors a vacuum, can't abide a vacuum any place under heaven, however small. Now," says he, "all you got to do is to move out. Get empty of self, and automatically you're full of God." Now that's what I'm saying. Uncovering and discovering. He said it a long time ago. So, this is the great fact for us. The formula for sobriety and the formula for the good life and the formula for self-discovery is one formula. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. When you and I honestly do these things one day at a time, for sobriety, the reason that they're written, all of these things happen to us. Because the same formula for sobriety is the same formula for the good life and the same formula for self-discovery. And with self-discovery comes our relationship to each other and to God. And with it comes a feeling of dignity, of value, of worth that is unspeakably wonderful. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the human ego, but it has everything to do with gratitude. I'm so grateful I can't see. Now, there's another thing the carpenter man told us that I like very much. And with this little thing, I'm going to quit. He said, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. Now, I've long since come to believe that every serious thought is a prayer. Every serious thought is a prayer. I haven't for 25 years, I haven't had a time of prayer. It's all time. Because I like the feeling of conscious unity. And this came to me some years back. We'd moved already down to Laguna Beach. And I was sitting there looking out the window one day, and there was maybe 150 snowbirds in a race. Now, snowbirds, as you nautical people know, you desert rats wouldn't know, but you nautical people know that the snowbirds are a certain size of small sailboat. Certain size of a sailboat. They call them snowbirds. And they were in a race. And I'm sitting there watching them out of my window. And there's 150 of them, and every one of them are going a little bit different direction. And there's only one wind. Did you heard me? And I'm sitting there looking at him, and I remember a little verse that I learned as a kid. And it goes like this. Some ships ply east and some ply west by the self-same wind that blows. 'Tis the set of the sail and not the gale that determines where it goes. Isn't that beautiful? One God and Father of us all. And it depends only on our relationship with Him. What our relationship with each other and with life is going to be. This is the great fact for us. When we see to it that our relationship with Him is right, great things happen. And so I try to keep it that way, and I use a little gimmicks on myself. I'm liable to say 100 times a day, God is my refuge and my strength. Why? Why wouldn't it once be enough? Just to remain constantly aware of the living presence of God. Unity. Unity, not separation. Fear not, little flock, it's the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. I like to say that, because it reminds me all the time that every good and perfect gift is from His hand. Now, I'll quit with this. I told you that I had come by living with you for 30 years, 31 years. Come to total acceptance of the fact that we're all God's kids. And as God's kid, my job is to go about His business. That's my job. And that is specified point blank in our 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. A lifetime job. So it's my business to go about His business, helping His kids do things they need to have done, sharing my experience, strength, and hope with anybody that wants it in love. That's my business. And it's His business to take care of me. That is not my business. It's His business. And I don't get mixed up. I do that, and evidently He does His thing, because I never had it so good. This is the only easy life I've ever known, the only good life that's ever been mine in my entire lifetime. And again, I'm so grateful I can't see. And my gratitude starts with you. With you. People just like you. Because it was you that took me on your laps and rocked me to sleep 31 years ago. So my gratitude starts with you. And then with the program. And then with God. Because that's the way it happened to me. But I don't believe God cares anything about that, because we do this a while and we come to see that God is you. And God is the program. And God is me. God bless you. Thank you very much.